Hey everyone, welcome to Launch Codes Football. My name is Chris,
And I'm Chelsea.
and today we're going to be talking about week 17 of the NFL season. Chelsea, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling pretty good. We got a lot to talk about today, so I'm excited to get into it, and I'm sure you feel similarly.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to talk about this week's football because I think some interesting things went down that
hmm
I'm excited to get into today. So,
There was a lot of mind boggling things that happened this past week in both conferences.
what a great time. But first, Chelsea, let's start out with your topic. What you got for us today?
All right, so we're going to start off today with that particularly infuriating game to me as a Colts fan, the Titans-Texans game, right? So going into this game, the Titans were the conference leaders, the AFC South conference leaders. And it would not have been this way if the Colts had beaten the Jaguars the first game of the year, but that's fine. So, the final score for this game was 41-38, and honestly, you really got to commend the Texans for the offensive effort they put up in this game because their O-line is terrible. They have a bunch of wide receiver twos. They have Kiki Cootie and Brandon Cooks, I think, and really everyone after that is a bunch of nobodies. They have no tight ends. Their running backs are washed now. They're really not that good. But what do they have? They have Mr. Deshaun Watson. And if you have Deshaun Watson on your team, you know that there's always a chance you can go in and beat anyone because that dude is good. So, I mean, like I said, they really tried their best on offense. Clearly not on defense, considering they gave 41 up. But the offense is pretty bad outside of Watson. And Houston was down 17-9 heading into the second half of the game. So as a Titans fan, you're probably looking at that and going, well, that's closer than I'd like it, but we'll probably win this game, right? I'm sure Titans fans were feeling pretty good about this game. I mean, they had held Houston to 3 field goals when they had gone into the red zone, no touchdowns. So, I mean, had, reason and right to feel good. So Watson went off in the second half. He must have heard a halftime speech by JJ Watt or something because this dude went off in the second half, posting 3 of 4 touchdowns for Houston. He threw touchdowns to Brandon Cooks and Pharaoh Brown, and then one of their running backs ran a touchdown in for the fourth one. So the Texans took the lead at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and they had posted 31 points. It was 30, actually 35. It was 35-31. Texans were winning, right? Ryan Tannehill then proceeds to drive the Titans down the field on a 19-play, 89-yard touchdown drive that sucked 8.5 minutes off the clock. Now you're looking at this game and you're looking at this Texans defense, which, let's be honest, the Texans defense has about 3 good players on it, right? They have JJ Watt, they have Zach Cunningham, and they have one pretty decent secondary player. But really, outside of that, it's that's really, the most impressive people on their team. And side note, Zach Cunningham is very underrated. He's a linebacker and he's actually very good. But 8.5 minutes off the clock. Tannehill ran the ball in for the score on a broken play, which I was watching this game, guys. Literally, the play before he ran the ball in, he almost threw an interception in the end zone. And it went right into the guy's hands and he dropped it. And this, my friends, is why you play defense, because clearly people who play defense should not be receivers, because any competent receiver in the NFL would have caught that. But he didn't. Bounced right off his hands. I screamed when that happened. I was so mad. But broken play the next play because, of course. So the score is now 38-35. Titans take the lead. They're feeling pretty good, right? But then Deshaun Watson's, puts the team on his back and takes them down the field to score a field goal, leaving 18 seconds on the clock. 18 seconds. This is even less than the the Raiders. This is even less than the Raiders let when they broke that play. This is less time than that, I think. Can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it is.
No, it's about the same amount of time.
Okay, that's what I thought. So then it's 38-38. Then the Texans proceeded to Texans on defense and led up a huge 52-yard throw down the field in a broken play to A.J. Brown to put the Titans in field goal range. And then backup kicker Sam Sloman, who's filling in for Gostkowski because he has hamstring issues or something, lines up from 37 yards and it hits the right upright. Woohoo! Texans win! No, not so fast. And it goes in. It hits the freaking upright and goes in. And that's how the game ends. Titans win 41-38. When I tell you I screamed when that happened, I am not exaggerating. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then, of course, you know, the small, sensible voice in the back of my head was like, if you had beaten the Jaguars, this wouldn't have happened. And I was like, shut up, small voice in my head. But so let's talk about playoff implications. Titans win the AFC South, claiming the 4th seed. Indianapolis gets in as the 7th seed wild card after the Dolphins got absolutely obliterated by the Bills, which eliminated the Dolphins from playoff contention. So Ravens at Titans on Sunday at 1:05. It's an intriguing matchup. And of course, the Colts kick off the playoff slate on Saturday at the Bills at 1 in the afternoon. And honestly, they're both intriguing matchups. And I'm sure we'll get into that in a bit and talk about it and what it's going to look like. But this game was crazy. I have seen a lot of crazy games this year. I mean, you had that Raiders game. You had the walk-off Hail Mary to Hopkins. There have been some crazy games this year. You had the playoff win the Colts had against the Packers when Valdez-Scantling fumbled the ball away. There have been some crazy games. But this in particular was a crazy game because Deshaun Watson does not deserve this, man. Him and J.J. Watt, the Texans do not deserve them. Did you know that Deshaun Watson had the most passing yards in the league this year?
That's
with
crazy.
That anemic offense, with Will Fuller out the final 5-6 games of the year because he took an illegal substance and got suspended. Honestly, if Deshaun Watson wasn't on the Texans, he probably would have been in the running for the MVP. Because he had the most passing yards in the league, more than both Mahomes and Rodgers, who were on better teams than him. That is crazy. Houston doesn't deserve him. Did you see the video, Chris, of J.J. Watt apologizing to Deshaun Watson as they walked off the field?
I didn't see that clip, but I've seen that J.J. Watt has been very passionate about like I saw his clip about, you know, him talking about how fans, you know, put in time to watch them and go to their games. And if any teammate is not showing up, then it's, you know, they shouldn't be there if they're not willing to play or want to win. And I mean, so it doesn't surprise me that he'd do something like that, especially him probably feeling a lot like, you know, it was the defense that let them down at the end of the game.
For sure. And J.J. Watt is a free agent this offseason. And a lot of people think that he's going to go ring chasing, that he's going to go join the Packers or the Bills or, you know, some other team and try and get a Super Bowl ring that he's never been able to get in Houston. And I mean, a few years ago, Houston was, 11-5? Under Bill O'Brien. So, I mean, it's not like Houston doesn't have the capacity to be a playoff team. Deshaun Watson is amazing, but he is wasting away at Houston. If they do not get some talent around that guy, he's never going to get anywhere, and he deserves so much more than that. I mean, if you put Deshaun Watson on a team like the Bills or a team like the Packers, who, if you look at the Packers, outside of Adams, they really don't have that many wide receiver weapons. I mean, you have Aaron Jones, but I mean, even giving Deshaun Watson that much, he'd literally post 45 points a game. I just feel bad for him. and JJ. JJ's probably going to leave, but Deshaun Watson signed a max contract after Bill O'Brien traded Hopkins. And honestly, I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he just thought that he couldn't turn down that much money, which, I mean, it's a valid point. But I just, like, as a Colts fan, I really like Deshaun Watson. And honestly, if the Texans weren't in the AFC South, they'd probably be my third favorite team because I really like them. But I just feel bad for him. He just doesn't deserve this. He literally posted 38 points against a terrible secondary and a playoff contender and still lost. He just doesn't deserve that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, and he was able to get up the field, get a clutch field goal. And
he drove down the field with his anemic offense. Like,
I think also the Titans defense isn't that great, but I think Deshaun, he played well this game. I mean, they were able to put up 38. And I really think the defense at the end of the game, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, when I saw AJ Brown catch that pass, I thought about you. I'm like, Chelsea's probably pissed, but
See, the most infuriating part about that is that AJ Brown has had the dropsies all year. He literally dropped 2 or 3 passes in the games that we played against him and the Titans. So of all the people I expected to not catch it, it was him, and then he caught it. I was like, cool.
I mean, but he's also like he's
really good.
receiver.
Don't get me wrong. He's really good, but
like I mean, it was an incredible throw. I mean, by Ryan Tannehill, and I mean a great catch by Brown. But you could see, one of the deep safeties messed up. He tried to jump a route. I think he thought that Brown was going to run to the middle of the field, and instead,
I don't know why he would think that when they have 18 seconds left.
That's true. Like, why would he run through the middle, knowing that if he gets tackled there, it's.
I mean, I don't know if they had a timeout left. Maybe they did. Maybe that's why he thought that was going to happen. But seriously, with 18 seconds left, why would you run someone down the middle of the field? You wouldn't even have enough time to spike it.
I mean, he did get tackled inbounds. I think they did have a timeout, because they were able to, I think they ran the ball and then were able to call a timeout and then kick the field goal. I think, if I'm wrong, please forgive me, but I think
can't
that's
remember,
what happened.
But I'm pretty sure they did have a timeout, because I know that Romeo Crennel had a timeout because they tried to freeze him.
Yeah,
it didn't work, clearly.
I mean, overall though, it's still a heck of a game, and
definitely.
On that field goal, 1 inch off, and that ball maybe doesn't go in, who knows. And you actually look at the TV cast, you could see the ref look at the other ref to be like, did that go in? Like, I thought that was pretty funny. And then
it was funny.
And then
oh my gosh, I just
good, but yeah, the salt is real, I think, here.
That's all right though. I'll get into what I think is going to go down in the Titans-Ravens game later. So we'll talk about that later.
Fair enough. All right. So next topic we got here. I think we have a fun one for me today. I mean, okay. Well,
I was about to go off.
I'm not going to go off, but I just don't understand this. Okay, we're going to talk about Eagles versus Washington. Washington won. They are in the playoffs. They won 20-14. I mean, it was...
I called them to be in, by the way.
Same here. We both got that right.
Week 9 called them to be in. So, virtual high five. Woo!
I mean, honestly, I think that I thought Washington was going to win the division. They certainly made it a bit tough on themselves near the end of the year, but they got it. But through this game, Giants fans are having an awful week this week because... for those of you who may not know what happened, the division came down to the last week. What happened was, earlier in the day on Sunday, the Cowboys and Giants played. The Giants won in this very odd fashion where Wayne Gallman fumbled the ball at the end of the game, and everyone thought the Giants were going to win it, but he fumbled the ball on a run, but he didn't fumble it because when he landed on it, he sat down, like his butt was on the ball. So they counted that as down and in control. I'm like, whatever.
All right, whatever.
So the Giants fans are like, oh my gosh, we did it. So what they have to do now is, since they've beaten Washington twice this year, Washington has to lose this game to the Eagles for the Giants to make the playoffs and win the division. So we get to Sunday Night Football, and Washington and the Eagles are in a tight game. Jalen Hurts isn't playing great, but he has 2 rushing touchdowns, and it's a 3-point game going into the fourth quarter. And then I think most people, especially Eagles fans, know what happened next.
Shout out to Kyle.
Doug Peterson takes out Jalen Hurts and puts in Nate Sudfeld, the third string
Indiana alum.
quarterback.
Woo!
The third stringer who I mean, he's been around for 4 years.
He's a
and
backup.
He started it in a few games, but this move didn't make any sense. People were like, is Jalen Hurts, is he hurt? Is something going on? Also, we have to keep in mind that Carson Wentz is out due to COVID in this game.
No, he wasn't. He was a healthy scratch. He was healthy, and they didn't activate him.
Okay. Well, he was on the list of inactives, and I guess I read that and thought, okay, because I know they had a lot of players out this past week.
But he was a healthy scratch. They sat him, and he was completely healthy.
You are right. Then that's my bad. But oh my gosh. Okay, then this just makes it even worse. Better. This makes the story even better. So the problem a lot of people had with this move is, some people think, very few people feel this way, but some people might think, well, it's a meaningless game in week 17. What does it matter? Well, I think there are several factors playing into account here. No, I don't think the Eagles cared that much if they get the Giants in the playoffs. Like, why should they care? That's their division rival. It doesn't matter to them. So, I mean, the thing is, if the Eagles lose this game, they get to the 6th overall pick for next year's draft. And so a lot of people are thinking Doug Peterson tanked this game. Now, the problem, he may have, and his excuse, he was asked after the game whether he was coaching to win the game or not. And he said, of course I'm coaching to win the game. I thought, he's saying like Nate Sudfeld deserves to play. But this decision just baffles me. Like, he's either a really bad liar, or his decision is just dumb.
Stupid.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Doug Peterson is a Super Bowl winning coach. He's the guy that we praised for calling the play where they threw to Nick Foles in the Super Bowl. He called a great game that game, and they were able to get the dub over the Patriots and
Yay.
win the Super Bowl for Philadelphia. That's huge. They've never won one. So that was so huge for them. This is the guy that, came in, and Philadelphia has always had this underdog mentality. And through the year, even this year, they've still had that tough mentality that they were willing to play at the end of the game. But I've heard some guys on ESPN talk about this, and I think this is true, that they just it wasn't that mentality. It seemed like the coach took that away from them. This is his first year missing the playoffs. I don't think he'll get fired over it.
Some people want him to be fired after that.
After this decision, I mean, I don't think it's worth firing over.
I agree.
Over one decision like this, but you got to think, like, through the years, last year they were able to win 9 games and make the playoffs, and through most of Doug Peterson's career in Philly, it's been good. But what's it going to be like now that they're not good? It seems to me like things are kind of melting down over there, and this happens when you have bad teams. I understand that. Like, when things get bad, like, things can become toxic, but this decision just made no sense. The players didn't seem to love it. There was just a lot of things going on the sidelines, and just Doug Peterson said he made this decision on his own. Jalen Hurts was asked about it. He said, I just got to trust coach. But of course he's going to say that. Like, that's what you say, especially when you're a rookie.
You can't not say that.
Yeah, you have to say that, whether you like the decision or not, which there's no part of me that thinks that Jalen Hurts was like all right, I'm cool with it. Like, he wants to be in that game, and he's your rookie QB. If you feel like Nate Sudfeld needs time, it's his fourth year. It doesn't make any sense. You have a rookie QB in somewhat of a meaningful game in the fourth quarter, down by 3. You put him in the game, see what he can do. I mean, I know we've had a couple games to see what he can do at this point,
And
but
it hasn't been that bad,
no, he's looked like the best QB on their roster this year, to be
which is saying
honest.
something.
And so, and I've also heard reports that Carson Wentz isn't happy, that their relationship is just gone, and there's just all
I
this
don't
stuff.
I don't even know what's going on because I get headlines from ESPN, Bleacher Report, Yahoo Sports, The Athletic, NFL, whatever. And one of them will say Carson Wentz, his relationship with Doug Peterson is fractured and he wants out. And then another one says that Carson Wentz said that he hopes he can repair his relationship with Doug Peterson. So I honestly have no idea. I mean, pertaining to Doug Peterson's post-game conference, when he was asked, were you trying to win this game? He was like, yes, I was trying to win this game. I left my best players on the field. Zach Ertz, Kelsey, the corner, what's his name? He played for the Lions. Do you remember?
I don't remember.
But the really good corner that is on the Eagles, he was like, yeah, I left my best guys on the field. I'm trying to win the game. And that's true. Those
Oh, yeah.
are some of his best guys. But dude, let's be honest. Is Jason Kelsey going to win you the game? Is Zach Ertz going to be able to catch passes and win you the game? Darius Slay, that's his name. Is Darius Slay going to be able to carry the defense on his own? No. Those things fall to a quarterback, and you put your team in a position to lose when you took the best guy out. That's just how it is. And, quarterbacks are the most important position in this league, and that infuriates a lot of people because people think that it's not all about the quarterback, that you should be able to win in the NFL with a really good defense and a really good running game and really good trenches. And while that's true, we have seen proven time and time again that if you have a mediocre quarterback in this league, you're not going to get very far. If every other facet of your team is good except that, you are not going to get that far. A quarterback is important. And when you take out the best guy, you're jeopardizing your team's ability to go out there and succeed. And that's just how it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't understand this idea. I mean, if Sudfeld would have come in and played really great, fine. All right,
wouldn't be
cool.
having this conversation if he did.
But Sudfeld came in and he did not look good. I mean, at one point, Al Michaels said on the cast, he said, "What was that?" Like, that is a professional commentator saying, "What was that?" on live TV in front of millions.
And I just feel bad for Nate Sudfeld because I guarantee you he was not prepared really at all for this game. That, he just got thrown in there trying to see what he can do. He's the third stringer. He's not going to have a repertoire with his receivers or his running backs or his line. There's not going to be any team chemistry. So I am glad that this blame is not getting heaped on Nate Sudfeld because it has nothing to do with him. He was not expecting to get thrown into this game. And honestly, I don't think that he's as bad of a quarterback as he looked in this game. Like, is he a third string starter? Yes. Is he ever going to start in the league? Probably not. But is he the worst? No. I mean, he's not the worst. So I am glad that, people aren't blaming Nate Sudfeld for this loss because that would just be ridiculously stupid. But there's a headline on the NFL website that talks about Jason Kelsey explaining his conversation with Doug Peterson. And I haven't looked into it completely yet. But I mean, the fact that Jason Kelsey even feels like he has to go on the socials, on Instagram, Twitter, whatever, and explain what his comment meant. I mean, this team's just broken. And I honestly don't know what it's going to take to fix it. Whether I do think, for one, they should fire Howie Roseman, the GM, because he has made some very boneheaded decisions over the last few years. I think if you're going to fire him or Doug Peterson, you fire him. But I mean, they've already said they're not going to. So I think Eagles fans are just going to be stuck in a cycle of pain, and I don't know what's going to get them out of it, honestly.
Yeah. We'll have to see what the future holds for the Eagles, but right now you've got Carson Wentz on a huge contract, which I don't blame them for signing him back when they did.
He was
You know,
really good
yeah,
when they
and
signed him.
I mean, he was playing well for them. Things were going well. I don't blame them for trying to seal him up because, I mean, how often do you get good quarterbacks in the NFL? And so they signed him to a bunch of money. And either it's going to, there are a lot of people saying maybe Wentz wants to get out, maybe he doesn't. It's going to be hard for him to leave. I mean, there's just going to have to be that the Eagles, if they are going to trade him, they're still going to have to take a lot of that cap that he's taking up in order for people to want to trade for him.
Did you see Pat McAfee's segment on his podcast about explaining why he said on Twitter, stop with the Wentz to the Colts stuff? Did you see that segment?
Oh, really?
Yeah, he got on there and he was like, first of all, this is no hate towards Carson Wentz because he is a great guy and we have seen that he has the capability to be a great player. So this is no hate for him. But he was basically talking about how if the Eagles are going to trade him, they're going to have to do something with his salary situation because teams are not going to want to eat $30 million in cap to get him. It's going to come down to the Eagles. If they really want to get rid of him, they're going to have to eat the cap. And that's just how it is. If they really want to trade him, that's what they're going to have to do. But if they're not willing to do that, no team is going to be willing to go, yes, I will sacrifice $40 million of my cap to get a quarterback who had a bad season last year and may be permanently broken. No team is going to logically do that. Even teams that are a little more risky. Because, I mean, the general consensus right now is that the Colts are going to go after him because of his connection with Frank Reich, because he was the offensive coordinator in 2017 with the Eagles. He's worked with Carson. They had a really good repertoire together. They worked well together. So that's the general consensus. But I don't think that people really know that the Colts GM, Chris Ballard, he is not going to eat $40 million in cap to get a guy like Carson Wentz. Even as much potential as he has, and even as great of a character as he does have, that's just not going to happen. And the Eagles, I think, are going to realize that if they really want to get rid of him, it's going to hurt a lot. But if that's what they ultimately want, that's what they're going to have to do. But they're going to have to convince teams that they aren't going to have to eat a bunch of money. And if they can't convince him, he's not going anywhere, even if he wants to.
Will be an interesting offseason with Carson Wentz and the Eagles. We'll see what happens. We'll see if he leaves, if he stays. It'll be good. It'll be great NFL theater.
Mm-hmm.
And
this offseason is one of the most exciting in a while.
And yeah, it'll be interesting, especially when draft time comes around.
And we'll be right here to cover it.
Oh, heck yeah. All right. Next game we got here. Chelsea, what do you got for us?
All right. Let's talk about the most excited franchise this past week, right? Steelers-Browns. Let's talk about it. So the Steelers rested key players in this matchup, considering they had already claimed their playoff spot. Some of these players included Ben Roethlisberger and TJ Watt. So, I mean, they weren't running at full capacity. The Browns themselves had COVID issues in this game, which included having Denzel Ward out. But outside of the players being rested and players having COVID, let's talk about the players that actually did play, right? So Nick Chubb had himself a game per usual. He scored the first touchdown of the day for 47 yards, in which I think Cleveland actually exploded when that happened. It was the first quarter. It's not like it won them the game, but I really think that Cleveland exploded when that happened. Because they had 7,000 or 8,000 fans in the stadium, and it sounded like they had a whole stadium of fans. So Cleveland was rocking. He had 108 yards on 14 attempts, which, I mean, if you follow Nick Chubb, that's really not the best game for him. He consistently posts, 135, 140, 150-yard games. So, I mean, it wasn't his best game, but it was definitely, better than a lot of running backs in this league. The first three scores of the game for the Steelers were field goals, considering that starting quarterback Mason Rudolph was leading the offense. No offense, Mason. but you're not Ben Roethlisberger. Both Jarvis Landry and Austin Hooper had touchdowns in the third quarter for the Browns, and MJ Stewart had an interception for the Browns this quarter. At this point, the score was 9-24, with the Browns, having a pretty substantial lead at this point. But then in the fourth quarter, the Steelers got on a bit of an offensive roll. Chase Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster both got touchdowns sandwiched around a dumb turnover on downs by the Browns, which I don't understand why they did that. It was 4th and 7 on the Pitt 35. You're close enough to kick a field goal, and it's 4th and 7. If it was like 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, whatever. You want to keep pouring it on. I get that. You don't get it. Oh, well. But 4th and 7? I mean, you weren't at midfield. You were on their side of the field, but you have the lead. Like, why jeopardize it potentially by going for it? Why not just take the points? But that's just my opinion. So, I mean, they get these 2 touchdowns. That are sandwiched around this turnover on downs. So it's now 22-24, and the Browns are only leading by 2 points. So Browns fans are getting real worried at this point. Real worried. But unfortunately for the Browns, it was too little too late for the Steelers. They tried to onside punt, and Browns got even more worried at this point because one of their players tried to sit on the ball and barely recovered. But they ended up getting it. Woo! But if you watch the play, the ball bounced under him, and he looked down, he sat on it, and it was like, wait, the ball. And he tried to get his arms under his legs to get it. It was just really awkward looking, but he almost lost it. But somehow.
That almost looks like an injury waiting to happen.
I know. It was kind of reminiscent of the Wayne Gallman play of him just sitting on the ball. That's more or less what happened. Guys, stop sitting on the ball. But the Browns run the clock out behind a mighty 3rd down conversion and celebration by Baker Mayfield that involved a lot of screaming and a lot of pointing and a lot of jumping up and down, naturally, because the Browns have not made the playoffs since 2002. I was 4. That is a long time. So, honestly, congratulations to the Browns. Make the playoffs. They get to face off against the Steelers again for the 3rd time. Back to back. That's their matchup. So playoff implications, the Steelers win the AFC North and they get the 3 seed, while the Browns get in as the 6 seed. These teams will rematch in Pittsburgh on Sunday at 8:15. So, I mean, the Browns have lost a game to the Steelers and they've won a game. So this is the tiebreaker that's going to determine which team was better this year. But let's talk about COVID concerns, right? There was a lot of big news that came out earlier this week about COVID concerns for the Browns. So Browns coach Kevin Stefanski tested positive for the virus and is going to miss the game on Sunday. So they're going to have another coach coaching the game in their first playoff game since 2002, and their head coach gets COVID. That is just so 2020. And I know it's not 2020 anymore, but that is so 2020. Let's just admit it. Along with Kevin Stefanski, a few other coaches tested positive, along with offensive lineman Joel Bitonio, which is a big loss for the Browns because he's not going to be playing, most likely. I'm pretty sure that he isn't since it is on Sunday. But that's a huge loss for the Browns, considering that the Steelers have the top pass rush in the NFL. That's a big, big loss. That loss might even be bigger than Kevin Stefanski. So, I mean, they also have other players that are dealing with COVID too. And I just feel bad for Joe Bitonio because he's the longest tenured Browns player on the team and the player who has suffered the most through the years of being on the Browns. They finally make the playoffs and he finally gets to play, and then he gets COVID and now he's not going to be able to play. Of all of the people who did not deserve that, it's him. I feel really bad because that just sucks. But Chris, do you remember a few weeks ago when we talked about that Ravens game getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and then the Broncos game didn't get pushed? Remember when we talked about that?
Oh, I do.
So let's talk about that now. Does this game, because of COVID concerns, get pushed or delayed? Because they play Sunday at 8:15. So they are in the last wild card time slot this weekend. Currently, it's looking like they're not going to. What do we think? I mean, let's refer back to the Ravens game. It got pushed and pushed and pushed, and the Broncos one didn't. Does the NFL hold up to their standard like you talked about some while ago?
So I think their argument, all right, we talked about the Saints and Denver game not being postponed. But the Steelers Ravens was postponed over and over and over until Wednesday at 4 p.m. or 3
So it's like
o'clock.
3 in the afternoon when no one was going to even watch it.
It was odd, and many NFL fans weren't happy with them. I still think they did not build very much flexibility within this schedule in a year like this, and you don't build enough flexibility for things like COVID happening. It's ridiculous. That's a whole nother point. But as far as their argument to potentially not postponing this game, it's probably going to be, unless, here's the thing, COVID is going to have to spread through the whole team, basically. Their argument with the Baltimore Ravens and Steelers game is that a bunch of players, like from all different positions, were getting COVID, and it was spreading to a lot of the team. So they decided to postpone it then. And if it's only happening to a few players, yes, these are key players, the NFL is not going to postpone the game. That's going to be their argument.
Do you think that's fair?
Well, I mean, part of, okay. Obviously, I think if people are taking this thing seriously, you can still get it, obviously. If they're not taking it seriously, then no, I think it's fair. But if the teams are actively trying their best to not get COVID, then I think I hesitate to say whether it's fair or not. I mean, honestly, this year you have to adapt to so many things, and I mean, I don't know if it's fair or not. I think it's just the way that it is, and that teams have had to deal with this all year. And at this point, you just have to work with what you can. It's not great. And the Browns actually had this not too long ago where like all their receivers were missing due to COVID.
Yeah, that was just last week.
So it just kind of, I mean, and also the Browns recently had a problem. They couldn't practice. Their practice facilities were closed due to COVID basically up until this game, and they still came out and won. I mean, that you got to give props to them. Like, that's impressive in my opinion. But as far as it being fair or not, I don't know. I just think go ahead.
There was an article posted at 10:38 a.m. this morning on ESPN, and the Browns training facility is remaining closed on Wednesday as the team continues to conduct contact tracing. And they also announced on Tuesday that, Stefanski wasn't going to be there, that he got COVID, and special teams coordinator Mike, I don't even know how to say his name, Preffer, will serve as acting head coach Sunday. And a source told ESPN that offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt is expected to call the offensive plays and coaches in place of Stefanski. Joel Bitonio tested positive, and wide receiver Kaderil Hodge and defensive backs coach Jeff Howard and tight ends coach Drew Petzing were the others to test positive. Also, Browns star cornerback Denzel Ward, rookie tight end Harrison Bryant, linebackers Malcolm Smith and BJ Goodson, and safety Andrew Zendeo all sat out this past Sunday's playoff clinching victory over the Steelers after testing positive for COVID-19. Nickelback Kevin Johnson was placed on the COVID list as well before this game. So the players that were on the COVID list that did not play in this past game, if they clear all of the tests and everything, they should be able to play in this game on Sunday. At least the players who didn't play last week. But let's just hypothetical situation this and think, okay, what if they don't get cleared? That's offensive linemen, cornerbacks, safeties, wide receivers, and coaches, and linebackers. That's like a third of the positions on their team.
That is a fair point.
That sounds like it's pretty spread, right? I mean, we talked about the Broncos game, how it was just the quarterbacks that got it, right? And they didn't feel they could postpone because it was contained, right? But looking at this article, it's not just one position, right? It's not just on the offense or on the defense, it's both. So if the NFL is going to try and use their previous argument talking about how they feel like they can only delay games that have big spread, like the Ravens and the Steelers, this is big spread on the Browns. And the Steelers, I think, might have one or two players out as well. So, I mean, where do you draw the line, right? So I think that is important to talk about. It's like this game is an in-between the Broncos game and the Ravens game, right? Because the Ravens, they were everywhere. Steelers had it, Ravens had it, postponed it. Broncos, it was one team. It was one position, and they decided to not cancel it. With this team, it's mostly on one team, but it's not contained to one group of players, right? So, I mean, I think that the argument could be made that this game should get delayed.
I agree with you.
Especially if the players who didn't play last week, if those guys aren't able to play this week either, I don't know. I think that's important. I think it really hinges on whether or not the players who missed last week are going to be able to play this week. Because I think if those guys are going to be able to play, that the game should still be played. Because then it's only like 2 players that aren't going to be in. And they're both on offense. But if those players don't play either, I don't know. I think that might be worthy of them pushing it. But the problem is they didn't build in any extra time to push it. So the NFL is stuck between a rock and a hard place. If they push it to Monday and they play on Monday and the Browns win, they don't have as much time to prepare for their next game. But if they don't push it and the Browns lose because a third of their team is out, then I think it's interesting. And I don't think that the NFL is going to push the game. And I think if all of these players don't play in this game, then that's wrong. Because they were willing to do it for the Ravens game. And this game has similar spread for one team. So, I mean, if you're going to hold the Ravens to that standard, shouldn't you hold the Browns to their standard too? Because this is not just one position room like the Broncos. And I feel really bad for the Browns, right? Because of all the teams in the NFL, this is not the team that deserves this, right? Haven't been in the playoffs since 2002. Head coach, might win coach of the year, probably deserves to, right? And Stefanski's not going to be there. Joe Batinio's not going to be there. I don't know.
Honestly, you're right. With all of that, should it probably be postponed? Yeah. I mean, and we're going to even talk about the people who are tested negative. Like there's even we don't know if this thing is really spreading throughout the team, then who knows? This could be a real danger to some people too.
Yeah.
I think that's another part we have to look at. But with the Steelers and Browns playoff game, for the sake of also competitive integrity, I think this should be postponed. If all of these guys can't play, and the Browns are not able to practice or not able to have a head coach, they're going.
I mean, their special teams coordinator is coaching the game. He's not calling the offensive plays. But I mean, that's a huge difference.
And what people don't understand is throughout the NFL season, you need those things. You need those things to. I know consistency was hard for so many people last year, but it's difficult in the NFL. If you don't have those things, it gets a lot more difficult to win games. People don't understand games a lot of times come down to like that last play or that one big play at the end of the game. The NFL has so many games that are decided by one score. It's crazy. And so what you need at those times is you need a fully well working machine. You need it to be well oiled, well trained. And if you're not having your coach, your experienced players, you're probably going to lose the game. If you don't know what you're doing by the end, or have a lot of inexperience, you're either going to have you're going to have a miracle story that they'll look on for years, or you're going to lose, and you're going to lose bad, or it's going to be ugly.
Or it's
And
going to be embarrassing.
exactly. And with the Browns, you're right. They haven't made the playoffs in such a long time, and they've finally made it. And if the NFL just kind of screws them over with this game, I'm assuming that they've taken it seriously. That's what I'm assuming. I'm assuming that they've taken their precautions, and that they've done everything that they can to prevent the disease from happening. So assuming that that is what the Browns have been doing, which is, I don't have a reason to believe it
I haven't
wouldn't.
heard any conflicting reports about players
Exactly.
going out and being dumb or anything.
Exactly. I think with all of this, we have to say, look, if you're going to be consistent, you should postpone this game probably. Are they going to? As of now, I don't really see it happening, maybe, but
I think
even
that's
then,
wrong, man.
they're gonna probably postpone it, what, like maybe to Monday. I don't Does one day of different does a
Yeah.
couple hours really make a difference? I don't even know. So
Yeah. It's a good point.
I mean, honestly, yeah. I mean, it would have been nice to have like maybe 2 weeks in between playoff games. I know that would have,
Mm-hmm.
given everyone what felt like some type of bye week or rest, but is that such a bad thing? Especially like with this year, with everything that's happening and the way that, this disease has kind of impacted the NFL. Would that have been such a bad thing to implement? Some teams play on this weekend, then the next weekend the other set of teams play. I don't think that would have been a bad thing. I think it would have really helped some teams, and they would have been rested. Maybe you would have had some people come off injury and they would have given them time to get healthy. It just doesn't make sense why they've scheduled things the way that they have.
I
And so
agree.
now we're in this predicament, and the Browns could be screwed over on their first playoff game in almost 20 years.
I mean, I just laugh because Roger Goodell, when they were figuring out all the COVID regulations and the rules and what they were going to put in place, he was like, "Yes, we have built-in adequate flexibility in case COVID affects this season." Clearly, Roger, you haven't. If you look at the course of this season, like we appreciate the sentiment, but you haven't. The season has been played exactly the same way outside of the Ravens game getting pushed, which a lot of people felt was the NFL being biased because of Lamar Jackson and how he's one of, arguably one of the best players in the NFL. Everyone loves him. He's a face of the NFL. Yeah, I don't know if that's true. Not advocating for that as truth. I'm just saying, I mean, if it was the Ravens Steelers in this game, do you think that they'd still be playing? If it was the Chiefs playing in this game, do you think that they'd still be playing? I don't know if biases are at play here. I certainly hope that they are not, because that would just not be cool. But I just feel bad for the Browns. I think that if any team has an argument that the game should be postponed, that it's the Browns, because they haven't been here. The 1 year they make it, this happens. I just really feel for you Browns fans. I do. And I hope that the game gets pushed, but honestly, I don't think it's going to, and I think that that's wrong. So I sympathize. If it was my team, I would be extremely angry that they didn't push the game.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're either going to see, if they do play that game, we're going to see one of the best stories for the
Stories.
Browns you'll ever see,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
or the Steelers will steamroll them, or it'll be just really ugly overall.
I
And
mean, if we look at the outcome of this game they just played, the Browns won by 2 without Roethlisberger, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, and a couple of other of their star players. They barely even won.
in
Not
fairness, they didn't have
discrediting.
practice. So,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, not discrediting the Browns' win, obviously. I mean, they still had really good players on the team for the Steelers. It was a real win. I'm just saying, if the Steelers have all of their starters outside of injured people, and the Browns on top of almost losing to backups don't even have their starters playing in the game, that would just be terrible if they got blown out because half of it wouldn't even be their fault. I just feel bad. And I think that the NFL was going to get a lot of complaints. I mean, don't you think that there'd be more talk about something like this if it was the Packers Saints game or the Chiefs Bills game or if it was the Super Bowl? I don't know. I just feel bad.
I think overall you're right. If it was some of those bigger teams, you might see a lot more talk or a lot more people to want to push the game.
Like if
I just want to
Patrick
see
Mahomes got COVID, like
I want to see consistency, but I don't know if we're
me
going to
too.
get that.
Yeah.
But anyways, next I did want to hit on this a little bit because I think it was interesting. The Rams versus Cardinals game. It wasn't a very high scoring, high offensive prowess game, but it was entertaining. Yeah, it was entertaining. I mean, so John Wolford, a lot of people didn't know who he was before this past week, and he came in and he wasn't like Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes out there, but he was a solid, competent QB that made some pretty good throws and had some good runs. And while their defense definitely carried them into the win, especially with a pick six at the beginning. And they definitely benefited from the fact that Kyler Murray wasn't playing a lot of the game. The defense played really well, and Wolford, like, he led his team and he was confident. That's something, like, if you listen to his post-game interview, he threw a pick the first throw of his NFL career. In his first start, he throws a pick, and he went to the bench and was like, I'm good, don't worry. And everyone's like, and then they asked him, they said, why did you say that? He's like, I was nervous at the beginning. Ball felt good come out of my hands, but he's like, I thought back to a game in high school where my first possession, I threw a pick, or my first play I threw a pick, but then I came out, played well, and won the game. And he was confident. I mean, and you look at the way he played, he was throwing some nice passes. And I mean, the way he was running the ball at the end of the game, there was like a 3rd and 8, and they pretty much had to get it to basically seal the game. And he runs over a defender. Like, he is not a big man at all. He's about the size of Kyler Murray, and he runs over a defender and gets the first down. And I'm just like, wow. I mean, this guy, he's confident. He knows what he's doing. He's rolling out of the pocket. He's making some nice passes. And
he also didn't have Cooper Kupp in this game.
Mm-hmm. And so the Rams looked, their offense, like I said, wasn't great. In the red zone, they weren't great, but they were able to put enough points up for them to win. I think, in my opinion, the Rams were able to give their defense the game, or help their defense win the game. Their offense isn't going to dominate you, but if their offense can continue to just work the ball down the field slowly and let the defense win the games, Rams are a legit team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at John Wolford's stats right now, and he was 22 of 38 for 231 yards, 0 touchdowns, and a pick. So, I mean, looking at those numbers aren't going to win you a playoff game, especially on offense. I mean, the interception was his first throw, and after that, he didn't really make any major mistakes. He didn't throw any more interceptions. I don't believe he fumbled. He was 22 of 38, which, I mean, is not the best, but it's decent. And he had 231 yards, so he was clearly competent enough to drive his team down the field and get yardage to at least keep the Cardinals off the field. Now, I mean, the Cardinals, or the Rams, in their game, they play the Seahawks, right? And we've seen in their playoff game, we've seen the Seahawks recently, and they have not looked good.
Mm-hmm.
Barely beat the 49ers on like 5 field goals. You have Russell Wilson, who was arguably an MVP candidate at the beginning of the year. So, I mean, this is potentially a very good matchup for a Rams team against a slumping team in the Seahawks. But I still don't know if the numbers that he posted against the Cardinals would be enough to beat the Seahawks. The defense would have to go off again. I mean, the defense carried in this game, obviously. You take away the defensive touchdown, and they only had 11 points. So, I mean, the defense has to carry, especially if Wolford has to play again. But for his first start in the NFL in a high intensity environment, it was pretty impressive. And I hope that he can replicate that if he plays again. And if he doesn't play and Goff does, he can rest assured that he helped get his team to the playoffs when everyone counted them out. And that means something. That means something for those guys that don't get as many opportunities to go out there. That's
Mhm.
important to them. So shout out to him for going out there and performing. Yeah, he didn't have the best game. He didn't throw a touchdown, but he helped his team win. And ultimately, at this point in the season, that's all that matters. Help
Mhm.
your team win. And if you win, you move on. And that's all people care about.
Exactly. You can go out there and throw ducks, but as long as you're willing, as long as you're leading your team to wins, all right. I
I mean,
think
he ran the ball good too. He
he
had
did.
6 carries, 56 yards. I mean, you look at the rest of his runners, Cam Akers ended up, playing in this game. He had 21 carries for 34 yards, averaging a yard and a half. So it's not like he was getting much help on the
Mhm.
running game. He was more or less forced to do everything himself. And he did.
And I think something that I give props to him on, obviously, like I said, it's a team effort and there's so many things that go into it.
For
But
sure.
his teammates really believe it in him. Like they had a lot of confidence in him. And I think that that's something that goes a long way. All through the week, coach was saying, I trust that he's going to prepare, or he's going to be prepared for this game. They said Sean McVay was talking about how hard and he plays and how hard he practices, how hard he prepares every week, even though he's never played a game in an actual NFL game before. And so when McVay was starting him, he was confident that he was going to get the job done. I mean, you take a look at something like that versus something at Washington with Dwayne Haskins and Rivera.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I don't think he said it, but I mean, you could tell it just looked like he didn't have very much confidence in Haskins.
He definitely
Um,
didn't. He
so you
didn't
look
even
at,
want him on the team.
I mean, he took him out of the game. He's taken him out of the game several times. And Haskins hasn't looked very confident, in my opinion. Whereas
Now he's
Wolford,
not even on a team.
you look at a guy like Wolford. I mean, there is not a play out there where I look and I was like, he didn't look like he was sure of his decision. Every play he was out there, he knew what he was doing and he knew what he wanted to do. And he was able to do it. The Cardinals defense isn't fantastic. I do know that. I think they have some solid pieces, but they're not the best defense out in the NFL. But either way, this was a game to make the playoffs for either team. And so this is in some ways it was a playoff game. And so
The Rams just wanted it more.
I
John
think
Wolford, he wanted it more, and they
I
won.
mean, and this kind of brings up the thought whether there's a lot of Rams fans out there saying, are they better off with John Wolford than Jared Goff? I mean, I saw
Which
several
we, oh goodness,
some Rams fans were saying when Wolford ran for the on 3rd and 8 and ran over a defender, they were like, Goff isn't that kind of guy. He's not going to do that. Wolford, when he did that, he got all of his teammates hyped up. They were all ready for him, or they were all cheering for him. Now, I do think as a franchise QB, it's not always the best decision, but in this specific case, he had, this is to go make the playoffs. I think that was a fine decision, and he's a backup. He hasn't proven
yeah,
himself yet. So the
yeah,
thought
maybe
is,
a brewing QB controversy in the playoffs for the Rams.
I mean, I'm just going to be honest. When Goff played against the Seahawks, it was a close game, but he looked really bad. I'm not, some people might say, well, you know what, Wolford came from your favorite college, Chris. So maybe your or favorite college team. You might be a little bit biased here. And maybe I am,
Yeah.
but let's talk about this objectively. If you look at the Rams, they have been good through most of the year, but one of the biggest complaints has been Jared Goff's inconsistency.
And if you look at his stats, it's true. You look at his performances, it's true. Jared Goff is the one thing that is holding back this team from being a Super Bowl contender. And I don't think that Wolford is the answer. But if he's hotter than Jared Goff is right now, I mean, do you play Wolford again?
And my thing is, like, Sean McVay, he really likes to have a creative offense. His style is just, he's good at making good offensive play calls. And I think, Rams fans sometimes disagree with that. Sometimes they get annoyed with him, but that's every coach. Fans are going to get annoyed with you if you have one wrong play or whatever. Because a lot of fans don't realize the intricacies that goes into NFL play calling. Anyways, I think of it this way. You have Jared Goff, who is he's a decent pocket passer. He's, but he's not going to give you the mobility like Wolford does. Wolford's able to roll out of the pocket and make throws going to his right or maybe even his left. He's able to make those on the run throws, and he has a bit of a quick first step. He's able to get moving. He's not the fastest guy out there, but his first step, he's able to be fairly quick. Yeah. And he's able to get you some more options on offense. He's able to open up your playbook, and he can pocket pass. So I'm not trying to be biased here, but I'm trying to give an objective look and say, you've got Jared Goff, who is a pocket passer by nature, but has proven that he's not always going to be consistent at it. When he's good, he's good. And when he's not playing that well, it's really difficult to get him going.
Yeah, when he's on, he's on. When he's on, he throws 4 touchdowns. When he's off, he throws 3 interceptions. He kind of reminds me of Jameis Winston.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Jameis Winston started for the Bucs last year, he had 50 some touchdowns, but almost the same amount of picks, right? So when Jameis Winston was on, he threw 5 touchdown passes, but he also threw 5 picks. So that it's obviously not the same. Exactly. But that's kind of what it reminds me of. I mean, when Jameis was on, they won games. And when he wasn't, they lost. And it hung on him, He was ultimately not the deciding factor, but played a huge part in whether or not they were going to win. And if he was on, they won. And that's just kind of how the Rams feel. Even with arguably the top defense in the league, that's still how they feel. I mean, they have the best defense. Any team that has the best defense deserves to be considered as a contender. But they aren't because of Goff, among other things.
Yeah. And I think that because just, we look at the Rams season, it's been for the most part good. Like they're obviously a good and legitimate team. And
except the Jets game.
Yeah. I mean, that was rough. But I think that you just gotta look. I mean, if you're Sean McVay, you're thinking, what kind of offense do I want to run here? I had Jared Goff against the Seahawks last time, and obviously he wants to have confidence in his quarterback that he'll bounce back. But all right, I'm gonna take 2 throws from both of those games. You have one throw where Goff is rolling to his right and has defenders chasing him. He tries to make a play throwing on the run. What happens? He throws a awful pick, and he later then calls it like one of the worst plays he's ever made in his career. Wolford has a play where he's running to his right in the next game, and he's running, defenders are chasing him, makes a solid 15-yard clean, crisp pass to his receiver who gets out of bounds, and it was a really good play, and it set them up for scoring range. I mean, I know those are just 2 passes, but they're somewhat similar situations in some ways. I mean, yeah, the Jared Goff one was closer to the red zone. Defenses get tighter, so it's not the exact same thing. But I'm just saying, we have 2 similar situations, and one quarterback threw an awful pick, one threw a nice pass to his receiver. I don't know. Now, it may not even be a choice for McVay. Eventually, it may just be that Goff he's not able to play. There may be no choice. Yeah. But if there is a choice, I just think these are things you have to look into. I'm not saying one is the right decision or the wrong decision. Because if you do get Jared Goff and you get the on version of him, you have a good shot at winning. You can
beat anyone.
Yeah, you can beat. Yeah. And you're taking a risk either way, no matter who you're starting in this game. But I
Yeah.
think these are just things that McVay's probably already thought through, or maybe, he obviously knows these two better than the both of us. So I think he'll do his best to make the right decision. But I just saying from a fan's perspective, these are the things you gotta look at, and you gotta wonder when it comes to who should start in this game.
And I really understand Rams fans' frustration, right, about this whole situation. Because obviously, if you look at the two of them, Jared Goff should be starting, right? He's considerably better than John Wolford. He has the ability to go out there and help his team beat anyone, and he's shown that he is really good. I mean, what? He was in the running for the MVP, a couple years ago. So, I mean, clearly the guy is good and clearly he's talented. He's just not consistent. I would rather have someone who was consistently mediocre than have someone who was hot and cold. That's just me. I don't know if everyone feels the same way, but if you're a Rams fan, you have to be frustrated at Jared Goff because he has the capability to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL if he's not already. The dude is good. He's talented. He normally makes smart decisions. He has good mechanics. He's smart. He's just not consistent. And that inconsistency might lead to him losing his job in the next few years. If he keeps that up, I can't see how the Rams can justify keeping someone who is unable to win them games on a consistent basis. I'm not saying that he might get replaced this upcoming season or even the season after that. But if he does not fix his consistency issues, I am unsure how much longer his leash is going to be for this Rams team. Because with that defense, they should be winning championships. With Cam Akers, a rookie, didn't have a good game, still really good, right? With Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, really good receivers, right? Not the best tandem in the NFL, but good enough. Tight ends, you got Tyler Higbee. Their line is decent enough. So it's not like they don't have the pieces on offense to be able to drop 30 points a game. It's just Jared Goff. And I want so badly for him to do good because I like him. He's a nice guy. He's a good person. He's a good quarterback. He's a good player. He's a good teammate. But I just don't know how much longer he is going to be able to stake his claim as the starter on this team, especially if he does not fix his consistency issues over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, and I think obviously he's definitely a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, but this year it's looked rough at times, and obviously that can be a mix of different things. It's not always the quarterback's fault, but I think as you can see, like through this game, you can see I think the thing is, like, if you actually look at this game as well, you look at Wolford between the 20s was good. In the red zone is where they struggled to get the ball in the end zone. And so I think he's shown that if he can clean that up, that could be a huge weapon against the Seahawks, who, it's ironic, their defense has actually gotten pretty good and their offense is the one that's kind of fallen off. And so if he could clean that up, he might even be able to win a couple playoff games, if assuming he has to. But if Goff can get, or can become more consistent through his season, then I think he can be the Rams answer. I think he can be their guy, and he's shown it. He got them to a Super Bowl. Now some people say, well, it was mainly their defense, but he was still the starting quarterback for the majority of that year, or for pretty much all of that year. So I think it's just something people have to think, or people will think about and have already probably talked about, especially over in LA, and all the Rams fans are probably have talked about this to death this year. But I just think it was interesting. And it was interesting to see it seems like a lot of Rams fans had some life, they were excited to see the backup go in and perform the way he did. And so were his teammates. And it's just something that's definitely a lot of people have on their mind this week. And I'm very interested to see how that playoff game is going to go.
I agree. So, I mean, how about we do a little transition into our hot take of the week with Mr. Jonathan, our friend, providing our hot take this week. So this week's hot take, let's get into it. So we got Sam Darnold will be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL in the next 3 years. Whoa. Wild. Let's see what his justification is. So he is using Josh Allen as the person to compare Sam Darnold against because they were drafted in the same year. If you compare the stats of Allen and Darnold over their NFL careers, both of them share similar stat lines, obviously with the exception of 2020, in which Josh Allen was, arguably a top 5 quarterback, top 7 quarterback in the NFL. So you put a good team around Sam Darnold, and it's not impossible to see that Sam Darnold may make that leap, just like we saw Baker Mayfield or Josh Allen do. So you want to get into the stats, Chris?
Sure. So let's go into Josh Allen's stats first for a basis. So Josh Allen's stats in 2018, he started 11 games. He completed 52.8% of his passes, had 2,074 passing yards, 10 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Also that same year, he had 631 rushing yards on 89 carries and 8 touchdowns. Darnold that year had started 13 games. He completed 57.7% of his passes. He was 2,865 passing yards for the year, 17 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Not great on the picks side. For 2019, Mr. Allen had started 16 games. He completed 58.8% of his passes, and he had over 3,089 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, and 9 picks. That's a pretty significant upgrade. But he did play 4 more games. Mr. Darnold had started 13 games that year. He completed 61.9% of his passes. He had 3,024 passing yards, and he had 19 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. He had 62 rushing yards on 33 carries and 2 touchdowns. Forgive me, I think I forgot to mention, but Josh Allen had 510 rushing yards on 109 carries and 9 touchdowns. All right. And for 2020, Josh Allen had 16 starts in 16 games and 69.2% completion, 4,544 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, along with 421 rushing yards on 102 carries and 8 touchdowns. That's incredible.
That's a pretty significant jump from 2017 or from 2018.
Meanwhile, Darnold started 12 games. He had 59.6% of his passes completed, 2,208 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 11 picks. And he had 217 rushing yards on 37 carries and 2 touchdowns. So we're going to exclude 2020 because that's what this hot take says. We're excluding the 2020 year where Allen took a leap. And as far as similarities, if we're just going to talk about these 2 years, I mean, I don't know about you, Chelsea. I can kind of see some similarities. Definitely Darnold's first year, he had a better passing percentage or completion percentage. And Darnold had 865 yards over Josh Allen in his first year. The picks, they were both pretty high. I mean, Darnold had 15, Allen had 12. It's not great, but Darnold had 17 passing touchdowns compared to Allen's 10 that year, but Allen also had 8 rushing touchdowns, whereas Darnold only had 1. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities between the two on their first year. For their second year, I mean, I think looking 2019, I mean, Allen definitely he got better through that year. I think it's interesting that I still remember that Texans playoff game where he was still making not great decisions. He was throwing like 90 yards to his fullback in a playoff game in overtime. And I'm just like, what
Bro.
is going on? I mean, look, no offense to fullbacks, but that's just normally not what you want. Darnold, I mean, yeah, he got better the next year, not by a significant amount. I guess though that Darnold had 13 picks compared to um, Allen's 9, which I think is interesting because Allen started more games. He started 3 more games than Darnold. And so if we look at these 2 years, I mean, I definitely see some similarities. I I do think though, I think coaching is a huge thing. I think that's something that people don't understand is that coaching is such a huge deal. And Darnold has been on the Jets where, I mean, we look at Adam Gase. I mean, he's probably going to be fired by the end of this year. And so
He
as
already
of
has been
now,
fired.
oh, he has been fired. My bad.
Yes.
It doesn't make any, it that stuff really impacts a player and can really shoot you in the foot, or it can, maybe you can survive and bring the team back to relevancy. I mean, Darnold was picked 4th overall, whereas Allen was picked, I believe, 10th. And so, I mean, the Bills were already in a little bit better of a situation than the Jets from when they drafted their QBs. So I mean, honestly, in order for Darnold to turn it around, he's gonna have to get some solid coaching around him. He's gonna have to have a solid foundation built or already there that he can come into and fit right in. So at least that's what I think. Chelsea, what do you think?
Let's play around with hypotheticals, right? Because I was looking up Sam Darnold's last couple of games, right? And it's not like they were particularly great. Let's exclude the Patriots game. Let's talk about the games before that. So the 27th, he played the Browns. He only completed 50% of his passes, but he threw for 2 touchdowns, no picks. Against the Rams, he had a 71% completion percentage, only threw for about 200 yards, but had a touchdown, no picks. Against the Seahawks, his completion percentage was 53, about 54, had 132 yards, not great, no touchdowns, no picks. And then against the Raiders, he had a 60.9% completion, and he had 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. So he had 6 touchdowns over his last 5 games and 3 picks, which still is not great. But I mean, if you look at the other games he played earlier in the season, against the Colts, he threw 3 interceptions. Against the Bills, he threw 2. Against the Dolphins, he threw 2. So, I mean, if you look at it, there has been slight improvement. Personally, I don't know if that's enough improvement to bank on him being your franchise quarterback, but let's say they do. Let's say that instead of the Jets taking either Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields at 2, let's say that they take Sewell, the O lineman, the generational O lineman coming out of Oregon. Let's say they take him. All right, cool. Or let's say they trade down and get 2 or 3 first round picks over the next few years. Cool. But let's say they take Sewell. I think that the Jets only have 1 first round pick. I know that they have quite a few, but I only think they have 1 first round pick. But for argument's sake, they take Sewell. How about we say that they take someone like Travis Etienne of Clemson to start as a running back, who is the highest touted running back prospect in this draft. Oh, maybe Najee Harris is a little higher. But let's say they take him. Let's say they go out and select a receiver like Rondale Moore out of Purdue, who's supposed to be really good. Or let's say they trade back and they take Jamar Chase, the really talented guy out of LSU. And let's just hypothetically say that they draft for every need that they want and hit on every pick. Do we think that that would improve Sam Darnold's performance if he was on a better team? I think that's a valid argument. I think if you put Sam Darnold on a team like the Chiefs, that he would probably play better than being on the Jets. If you put him on a team like the Colts or like the Bills. He would probably play better. But I don't know if you can bank on that many hypotheticals to be able to keep him, you know? And if all of those things end up working out and they end up with, you know, getting some people in free agency, they hit on their early draft picks, let's say that all of those things work out, I still don't know if that's enough to justify him making the leap like Allen did. And I still don't know if that's enough to justify that Sam Darnold would be a top 10 quarterback in the next 3 years. Because if he was going to be a top 10 quarterback in the next 3 years, not only would he have to improve his personal performance, if he stayed on the Jets would have to look like a brand new team. And I just don't know if you can turn over a whole roster in 3 years. But what if Sam Darnold gets traded? You know, what if he gets traded like to a team like Washington? With Riverboat Ron, a really good coach, developed Cam Newton, right? They have Terry McLaurin. They have a good rookie running back. They have an amazing defense. You put Sam Darnold on a team like that with a head coach like Ron Rivera, I mean, I think that gives him a better chance to succeed. But I don't think that he is going to be a top 10 quarterback in the next 3 years, especially if he stays on the Jets, just because the way that the Jets are now, it's going to take longer than 3 years to fix the franchise. Mm-hmm. But I do think that Jonathan presents an interesting point in comparing the two of them, though I think that Josh Allen is clearly on a better team than, you know, Sam Darnold is. But, you know, in 2018, the Bills, they didn't look like they did now. They weren't as good as they were now. They didn't have some of their receivers. They didn't have Diggs, right? They didn't have Stephon Diggs. They didn't have some of their players on defense. So it's not like we're talking about a 2018 Josh Allen on a 2020 Bills, right? The Bills were not as good nearly in 2018 as they are now. I mean, the quarterbacks that they were running before 2018 were nothing like Josh Allen, right? So, I mean, I think it hinges on either Sam Darnold getting put on a different team with good coaching and weapons, or it hinges on the Jets hitting on like 5 of their draft picks and managing to convince 2 or 3 people to come in from free agency. But I just don't know if you can bet on that many probabilities. I think that he'd have a better chance of succeeding if he got traded to a team like Washington, because they have good coaches, good defense, a good receiver, a good running back, a line that is not the best, obviously, but can be improved. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think it's an interesting argument, and I think this is going to be such an interesting offseason this season. The quarterbacks and the draft and everyone who's going to be moving around with COVID playing into it with the money and everything. It's going to be very interesting. But it would not surprise me if Sam Darnold ended up on a team like Washington.
Yeah. Actually, Washington could potentially be a good fit for him because I think he's, you know, a young enough quarterback to where they could potentially put somewhat of a future in him, but also he's experienced enough to where it's not just some completely new guy coming in. You know, he's had NFL experience before. And so I think Darnold to Washington, I think that could be a good move. As far as top 10, I don't see it as of right now. I could see Sam Darnold becoming somewhat of like an Alex Smith. You know, he's going to get you consistent numbers, and that's not a diss at all. I think Alex Smith has proven himself to be a fine QB. He does exactly what he needs to do, and he can win games just like that. And so I could see Sam Darnold potentially being that kind of player. He'll get done what he needs to get done. He can even win you some games. He can maybe even a playoff game, but under the right
Patrick
system,
Mahomes.
He's not gonna drop 400 yards a game and, you know, go for MVP every year. He's not that guy from what we've seen so far, but he's somebody that I think could win you games. And so if the Jets want to let him go, I don't blame them. But I think another team with a good coaching staff already around, a good culture built, I think he could do some damage. So yeah, as far as top 10, I'm not sold on it. I'm sorry, Jonathan, but I'm not sold on it yet. If he gets there, then you know what? You're right. And you got this. You had this take right from, you know, you got it. So props to you. But as of right now, I don't see it. But I could see him being above average and that kind of Alex Smith type of player.
For sure. I agree with you. I don't really think that Sam Darnold's going to go out and magically transform into Aaron Rodgers. He's still young. He's what, 24, 25. So, I mean, he's not even relatively close to 30 yet. So, I mean, he has a lot of time, especially under a good system, to be able to turn his career around. And for his sake, I hope he does. Because I love seeing players succeed. And I hope that he does succeed. But time is going to tell. I think Washington would be a really good fit for him. But I could also see the Jets being the Jets and not drafting a quarterback and keeping Sam Darnold and Sam Darnold still being bad. But I mean, let us know. What do you guys think? Hit us up on our socials. I mean, tell us what you think. Do you think that Sam Darnold has the potential to be a top 10 guy? Do you think if he gets put in the right system that he could be? Let us hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Send them. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook
now. Ayo.
YouTube comments. Let us know. All right. Next this is our last segment for the week, but we've got our wild card weekend game picks. This is what the whole season builds up to, is these playoffs right here. So
this is what our competition and winning game picks comes down to.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Chelsea right now is up 80-78. I am
hanging on by a thread.
I am 2 picks behind. Oh my goodness. Maybe we should do like a winner and loser gets something. I don't know. Maybe we need to make this interesting. If it gets, well, we'll see. We'll talk about that.
Let us know if you guys think that whoever wins should get a prize, and then suggest the prizes to us on our socials.
Or loser has to do a challenge. There's always that. But
oh goodness.
All right. So the first game we got here, Colts at Bills. I'm going to go with the Bills. You saw the way they slapped the Dolphins around, who are a good team. I mean, they won 10 games this year and they beat them bad. And the Bills just look on fire. Allen's having a great year. I don't think they're going to be a first round exit.
Yeah. My head says Bills, but my heart says Colts. But obviously I have to go into this pick analytically, right? But I do think that there are a number of factors that play into this pick. For example, if it snows in Buffalo and Buffalo is forced to run the ball, they do not have that good of a running game, and the Colts do. So if it snows like 8 inches in Buffalo on Saturday and it's a face-off between the Colts running backs and the Bills running backs, I would take the Colts running backs. But if it doesn't and Sam Darnold throws it everywhere, I mean, like you said, they're one of the hottest teams in the league right now. But how many times have we seen hot teams fall right out of the playoffs?
So I Josh Allen, think, right?
Yeah. So sorry. I don't think, yeah. What'd I say? Did I say Josh Allen?
You said Sam Darnold.
Oh, oops.
It's okay. It happens.
How many times have we seen hot teams fall out of the playoff way earlier than people anticipated? So it would not surprise me if the Colts won this game, especially if they get favorable conditions. Because you get favorable conditions, feed Jonathan Taylor the ball like 40 times and don't let Phillip Rivers throw it, and you have a chance. But if it doesn't snow, the secondary is really good. They can handle Josh Allen. I just don't know if Phillip Rivers has the capability to keep up with the Bills on offense points-wise. So I'm going to go with the Bills. But next week, if the Colts beat the Bills, I will be talking about it.
I have no doubt.
But yeah, I'm going with the Bills, sadly.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting. All right, next game we got Rams at Seahawks. Yikes. Honestly, I'm going with the Rams. The Seahawks don't look that great right now. I know they beat the Rams recently, but honestly, if the Rams start Wofford, I actually give them a decent chance to beat the Seahawks. Not that they're going to drop 40 or whatever, but I think that the Seahawks offense right now just looks like it's a mess. And Russell Wilson, unless he can get cooking, if he can get cooking,
if he gets cooking, the Rams are screwed.
Yeah, but I'm going to go with the Rams.
I'm going to go with the Rams too. They have a morale boost right now. They have a lot of reason to win. They're trying to prove people wrong. And the Seahawks just appear to be in a rut, which you would not expect from the Seahawks, considering they have Chris Carson, DK Metcalf, Russell Wilson, etc., etc., etc. You would not think that that offense would be posting 4 field goals a game against the 49ers. But here we are. So, yeah, I'm going to pick the Rams in an upset. But, Chris, I mean, if we're both wrong, then neither of us get points. So
Exactly. Strategic. I'm kidding.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next game, we got the Bucks at Washington. I'm going to pick Washington because look at the tradition of teams going into the playoffs with a losing record. They've both won games. The two that come to mind are the Seahawks, who had a good win against the Saints. They both won their first game. And then they were a good team. That's when beast mode started. That's when Marshawn Lynch had that big run, ran over what felt like 58 people into the end zone. And then, that's when he became beast mode. And then the second game is the Panthers, where they played Cardinals team on like their 4th string quarterback, and in a very ugly playoff game won. So far, both teams have come in with a losing record to the playoffs, have won one game. So the tradition, I think, will stay alive. I'm going to pick Washington. I'm going to pick and hope that the tradition stays alive. So, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pick the Bucks because Tom Brady is on fire. It seems like they finally got everything together on offense. Though I will say, Mike Evans got injured in week 17. And if he does not play in this game, I think that gives Washington more of a chance. But even if you take Mike Evans out, you have Antonio Brown and Godwin. So, I mean, and you got Gronk. And you got their other tight end. And their running backs. It's just a potent offense, and it finally feels like Bruce Arians had a chat with Tom Brady and said, okay, we're going to do what you want to do. And now it finally feels like they are doing what they want Tom Brady to do.
What their best
So, yeah, I'm going to pick the Bucks. I don't think that their defense is the best defense, but I think it's good enough to shut down Washington. But I really want to see Washington win this game. My heart says Washington, but I just can't justify away how hot the Bucks offense has been. But if Washington wins this game, I will be happy for them.
Yeah. I mean, the Bucks do seem to have it together, but we'll see what happens this game. I think that Washington, if they win this game, in my opinion, that'd be really funny. But
I agree. I'd love to see Tom Brady get toppled by a nameless team.
All right, next game we've got the Ravens at Titans. I'm going to go with the Titans. I think that King Henry is going to have a day. He's going to have a field day against the Ravens again. Last year he did it to them, and I think this year he's might be even better, or he's just as good, if not better, this year than he was at the end of last year. I'm going to go with the Titans. Chelsea, what do you think?
So I'm going to pick the Ravens because the Ravens offense finally got everything together. Dobbins is running the ball really well. Lamar's making good passes, and Marquise Brown is finally performing like a wide receiver 1. If only he had done that for my fantasy team this year, it's fine. I'm not salty at all. But I think that Derrick Henry is going to have a big game, as he always does. I mean, you hold the dude under, 130 yards and you're having a good game against him. I think that the Ravens defense is not the best. I think it's good enough. But I think that they're going to reach a point where they're going to force Tannehill to make some big plays. And if I was going to pick Tannehill or Derrick Henry to carry the team, I would pick Derrick Henry. I don't think they're going to be able to shut Derrick Henry down because we've seen like one team do that this whole year, and it was very difficult. So I don't think that he's going to get shut down, but I think if you put Lamar Jackson and Ryan Tannehill in a shootout, that Lamar Jackson's going to win. But I could see it being very high scoring, but I don't think that the Titans are going to win. I think that the Ravens are streaking right now, and I think Lamar Jackson's going to have a good game, both with his arms and with his legs. And I think Derrick Henry is obviously going to Derrick Henry because he's Derrick Henry. But I don't think that's going to be enough for the Titans to win because their secondary is horrible. And they are not going to, even if they do beat the Ravens, they're not going to get much farther than that. I think Lamar Jackson is going to smoke their secondary. Because you get past the linebackers and the D-line, if you're running the ball as Lamar Jackson, you're having a field day against that secondary. So I am hinging my bets on Tennessee's horrible secondary and Lamar Jackson not making dumb decisions. I'm picking the Ravens.
All right. Next game we got Bears at Saints. I'm going to go with the Saints. The Bears, I mean, they
made it.
They did make it, but they just haven't looked that good. Now the Saints, last game they looked good, but before then they haven't been great. So we'll see what happens. I think Drew Brees, he's gonna do enough to get them wins. I don't think he's gonna carry the game like he used to be able to, but I think they're gonna have enough to win this game. So I'm gonna pick the Saints.
I'm going to pick the Saints too. Honestly, the last couple of weeks, the Bears have not looked that bad. Mitch Trubisky has not looked that bad, and we already know that their defense is good. So I think that this is a potential upset game, especially, number one, if Alvin Kamara does not play in this game and they force Drew Brees to do everything while probably not 100% healed. I think that could wreak serious havoc for the Saints. If Drew Brees plays like we know he can and Alvin Kamara plays in this game, they're going to beat the Bears. I mean, I don't even know if Mike Thomas is going to play in this game. I mean, he hasn't even played most of the season. If they get Thomas and Kamara back, the Bears aren't going to win. If they get Kamara back, but not Thomas, they'll probably still win. But if they don't get either, this might be an upset game. If Drew Brees does not play well and he does not have Alvin Kamara to lean on, I don't know. I think that could spell an upset, but I'm still going to go with the Saints. I think that they are clearly a better team than the Bears, but if they do lose, it'll be because of injuries.
Okay. Yeah, I could definitely see it. So next game, or the last game we got here, Browns at Steelers. I know we've talked about this one a lot, but especially with everything going on with the Browns, I'm picking the Steelers. I don't think the NFL will move the game. I think the Browns could potentially be screwed out of having a coach or having all this stuff, or they already are at the moment. I'm going to go with the Steelers as long as they're COVID healthy. I think they're going to win this game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Steelers too because of the Browns' COVID issues. They're not going to have their head coach. They might not have a ton of their players. They also, I don't know if you heard, but they don't have Oliver Vernon either. He tore, I think, his ACL or his Achilles, and he's out for the year. So, and he's one of their premier pass rushers. So they're not going to have him regardless. I think that if the Browns have their entire team healthy, that they can go out and beat the Steelers. But just because they don't, I want the Browns to win. I do. They haven't made it since 2002. I think the whole NFL, except Steelers fans and maybe Ravens fans, wants to see the Browns win this game. I just don't think that they're going to be able to with all of their injury and COVID stuff.
It'll be a tough one, but looking forward to seeing what happens through the weekend. This is going to be, I think, a good playoff. I think there's a lot of stories, a lot of things going on. It feels like it's been forever since the last playoffs, even though I know it's only been a year. It just feels like every time at the beginning of playoff season, it just feels nice. It's just like, wow, we're back here again. So, all right. But I think that's it for this week. So thanks for listening, everybody. Tune back in next week for more content. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at _LC football _ Instagram at Launch Codes Football, and we have a Facebook now. Just made that, and so follow us on Facebook and our YouTube channel at Launch Codes Football. My name is Chris,
and I'm Chelsea,
and we'll see you next week.
Bye.